We're honored to welcome our presenters for the evening, Tammy and Mark Allen. These two have been they've been in the sawmill business since 1997. This part-time income allows them to be their own boss, spend time outdoors, and save quality materials from becoming mulch or firewood. There are other benefits, and we'll hear all about those in tonight's presentation. Take it away.
If we're ready, then we'll go ahead and get started. On our first screen, we thought we'd talk a little bit about where we started at. We started our sawmill business in 1997, and we set it up inside the city of Decatur in our backyard. We had no clue as to what we were doing, but we thought what we would do was we would recover logs from going to the landfill, and we would sell a few boards once in a while. All we did was we were taking material from tree services, and that's what we thought we would do. And we set our goals at if we could make $100 a week, we thought that would be pretty good. All right, so this is a photo of Mark's sawmill, which is a Peterson swing blade, and the loader that I use, we have in the middle there, that is our crane truck named Maxine, and you can see in the behind Maxine there are drying stacks of lumber. This is sort of what we're working on. This is sort of a base. So
yeah, and we have two mills. The other mill is a Casco band mill, and you can't see it. It's inside one of the doors. So we have a his and hers sawmill. Yeah, the loader we have there, it's an old John Deere tractor that we took the bucket off the front, stretched a couple chains across the arms, and it's got two big skidding tongs that we just drop over the logs, and we can pick the logs up and move them around, and that works pretty good for us.
I'm curious about the partnership with local to actually get the logs in the area, where people easily giving you their used logs.
A lot of the tree services in the area, they have to pay to dump their logs at the local compost facility or landfill, and so for them to be able to come out and drop logs off at our place for free is a win-win situation, because they're not getting charged to dump the stuff, so they can not charge the customer as much, and we get our stuff without having to pay for it. So everybody comes out ahead on that, and we're actually, recycling or stuff, lumber that would normally go into the landfill.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, sounds like a win-win.
The different kind of sawmills, like I said, we have two of them. One of them that you can see there is a Peterson swing blade, and it's for big logs. It'll handle stuff up to about 4.5 to 5 feet in diameter. And then we have a Casco band mill, which will handle the smaller stuff. And it'll hold, the band mill will do stuff 30 inches in diameter or less. One of the things with sawmilling is whenever you start cutting on your lumber, it takes almost a full year before you can start recouping any income, because it takes about 6 to 9 months to dry the boards once they've been cut, and then another 30 days in our kiln. And then once it's kiln dried, then you either plane it down on two sides, or you sell it as rough cut lumber. But rough cut lumber only sell for around 50 cents a board foot, and 50 cents to $1 depending on what it is. And your plain down lumber, you'll be able to get anywhere from $2 or $3 a board foot to, the sky's the limit, because we do a lot of selling on eBay, and we've got as much as $35 to $40 a board foot for stuff. managing your expectations is it's like what do you expect your outcome to be when you buy a mill? Are you going to cut stuff for yourself? Are you going to cut stuff to sell?
Are you going to cut for customers? Are you going to build your own home? There are lots of ways to be successful when you run a sawmill.
Yeah.
And buying and locating a sawmill, there was a question that we received on that. The best advice I can give on that is to spend some time with somebody that you know that already runs a sawmill, if you have somebody that you can do that with, because there's no substitute for experience when it comes to a sawmill, and getting a mentor on running a sawmill is important too. It's not as easy as just buying a sawmill, setting it up in your shed, and running. It's not quite like that.
Yeah, you have to look at each and every log and determine how it needs to be cut, where it needs to be cut, what it's going to be cut into, whether it be boards or slabs or turning material.
Timbers, decking, could be a number of different things.
And then it depends on what kind of logs that you're getting for a source. If you're getting small logs, you want a smaller mill. If a lot of the stuff you get is large, then you're going to need a bigger mill. So you just got to start weighing the pros and cons of what you have got and what you think you're going to need. And then, like some of the other equipment that you might need is a kiln. You're going to need a loader. You're going to need a place to dry your lumber once it's cut.
Okay. All right, on expectations. Research. That is I guess what I would call one of the key things is decide what mill is going to work best for you. Like Mark was saying earlier, are you going to cut big logs? Are you going to cut small logs? Are you going to cut urban lumber? Are you going to work from your own woods? It's the type of sawmill that you purchase will all of those things will be contingent on the type of sawmill that you buy. Investment versus return. I don't recommend that anybody go out and buy the top of the line sawmill right out of the chute, because you're going to need to spend some time with this and do some cutting, make a lot of mistakes, and you don't want to spend a lot of money on something ultimately that you don't want to do. Amount of time and work required. You can just about bet that the people that you watch run a sawmill, that they've been doing it for years, and they make it look easy, kind of like the figure skaters on the Olympics. There's a lot of experience behind that. So if you're thinking that this all goes very fast, it won't.
Yeah, and then you got to balance how much work you want to put into it, because you don't want to live out there in your shed and cutting all the time. So you got to balance how much time you want to spend out there and still leave a little bit of time for yourself, because this will not be a primary source of income. It's like I have a full-time job, and then I help Tammy run the sawmill. So we are able to, and when we first got started, we were able to buy all the equipment and go that whole first year without any money coming at all and still be okay. And but it's one of those things that you can make as much money as you want to put into it. There's a lot of money to be had out there. We are a prime example of that. We have people call and want timber for homes. They want trailer decking. They want slabs. They want turning blanks. They want boards. I mean, it goes on and on and on. So the harder you work, the more money you're going to make. So it's just a matter of how hard you want to work at this to really make a go of it. And then you got to like the people that you're working with. I mean, you're going to have everybody that has a business knows that some of your customers are not the greatest customers in the world. So you got to deal with that. And then some of the tree services that we deal with, because we've been in business for over 20 years, and we've never cut down a tree, and we've never bought a log. So we're getting all of our stuff from these tree service guys. And sometimes they're a little hard to work with because they want to drop off stuff to us that we can't use. I mean, we can't make a board or anything out of it. And sometimes you have to just take the good stuff with the bad stuff, or they will quit dropping them off to you. And then you got to have a little bit of mechanical skills, because like any other machinery, you're going to have stuff break down. You're going to have stuff that needs work, and you just can't always call a mechanic to get them over and work on it. So you got to have the skills to fix some of the stuff that goes wrong.
And have a good relationship with your small engines man. And the pleasures of operating a sawmill, I think I'll get to that one later. So I'm going to see if I can get to the next screen. Which mill works best for you, new or used? There again, if you've had some time to work with somebody and you've got a little experience before you buy a mill, there's nothing wrong with buying a new one. But there's nothing wrong with a used one either. It depends on what kind of money you want to spend if you're planning on financing. The other equipment that you'll need, which there's tons of it. And Mark and I, even though we set up our first mill inside the city, we had a 2-acre lot. So our neighbors didn't complain too much, because the sawmill that I was running, which was a Casco band mill, didn't sound much louder than a riding lawnmower. So they were cool with that.
Yeah, and then as far as your location, depending on if you're out in the country and you're at ag, you have no problem setting up a mill, because that's considered agriculture. If you're not, you got to check your zoning laws, make sure it's okay. And if you're gonna buy a mill, we're the kind of people that we always recommend, if you're going to buy something, have the money, use the cash, and buy it, and don't finance it. But
because you're paying interest on something that's losing value. Material sourcing. Now, we have never had our own woods, so we have taken all of our material from tree services, and we've also done custom cutting. And either one or any of them is a good way to run your business.
And then here's just a list of some of the other stuff that will help make it easier for you to do your job. You know, the saws, we have table saws, we have chop saws, and we've got 4 or 5 chainsaws. And the chainsaws we have anywhere from an 18-inch bar up to a 50-inch bar. And the one with the 50-inch bar we use on an Alaskan mill, and we use it to get the big logs down small enough to get on the big mill. We've had logs come in as big as 7.5 feet in diameter. Now, my Peterson mill will only cut ones up to about 5 feet in diameter. So we had to get that 7.5-foot diameter log down to a 5-foot log in order to start cutting it with the mill. And that's where the Alaskan mill with that 50-inch bar came in. And that will work you to death. So
we had a question about the Alaskan mill and what were our thoughts on it. And the Alaskan sawmill is good in very rare situations, and that is only for getting a log resized down to fit on the regular mill. I wouldn't recommend trying to actually make a business of running an Alaskan mill. You will. It is extremely hard work, and the point of running a sawmill is to not work yourself to death, but to earn an honest living.
Yeah.
We have a Nile dehumidification kiln. We also had a question on that, and I was surprised when she said she found a used Nile dehumidification kiln, because those things or rare as hen's teeth. So congratulations on that. There's lots of tips and tricks on running those kilns.
Yeah, and one of the thing at the bottom of the list here, a metal detector. If you're dealing with urban logs like we do,
that's an absolute must.
Yeah, because almost every tree that comes out of the city has got some kind of metal in it, whether it be nails, screws, lag bolts,
porcelain insulators,
everything. So we run everything through a metal detector. We find the metal, and then I have a little chainsaw that I use as a digging tool to dig out all the metal before it ever goes on the mill.
We have what we call a trash chain on it, and we know we're going to hit metal with it. So we have a special saw that we use specifically for getting the metal out. Now, as far as cant hooks, loader, ventilation and dust removal, edgers, storage space, and packaging equipment, it depends on where you're going with how you want to run your business. Now, what we do is we sell kiln dried, surfaced on two sides, and when we sell online, we do edge our material. But if you're not planning on doing that, then a lot of those pieces of equipment that you won't need. Safety. Now, as far as safety goes with me, in the first year that I had the sawmill, I was in the emergency room 3 times, and I have never lived that down. So these days, that's me running the sawmill. That's eye protection, ear protection, gloves, a dust mask with a valve, and I am not wearing long sleeves or sleeves that could get caught in my equipment. We run a crane truck, which is very, what word would I look for? It's a safety concern, as well as my loader. They're all older pieces of equipment, and they don't have all the safety features that modern equipment does.
Yeah, it's basically whenever you're loading the logs,
just be aware,
or picking up logs, be aware that the equipment, they can fall off the equipment, they can roll, they're real heavy, and if they roll over you, you will be hurt. All
right, ways to generate income. Over here on the side with the photos, firewood. That's one of the easiest ways to generate income. If it's the type of log that you're getting, then make firewood. One interesting thing about making the firewood is this was a tip that we learned from another sawmill operator. As you're making firewood, don't stack it. You throw it in a pile and let your customers pick it up, because you're going to spend a lot of time stacking firewood once you are up and running on a sawmill. Internally used, that's going back to having your own woods. If you're building your own home, you're making your own flooring, your own trim, your own decking, that's all great. We made a lot of our own flooring and trim when we built our home, and we love it. It's beautiful. It's a good way to use your sawmill.
Yeah, and then we sell a lot of stuff online. We have a retail store here at our place, but we also sell online. And a lot of the stuff we sell online, we sell on eBay. And so you sell small bundles of lumber. You cut it to where you've got fantastic figure. You do book matching. You do stuff that normally you wouldn't see anywhere, and the people that do furniture and craft people online will pay crazy amounts of money for the stuff that you cannot sell around here. We sell walnut and cherry and oak and maple here. If you don't have those, it's hard to sell around here. But online, if you soft maple, hackberry, honey locust,
elm,
all
catalpa.
that catalpa. They go crazy for it. You'll sell walnut around here for $8 to $9 a board foot. We've got online sycamore boards as much as $50 to $60 a board foot. So it's just crazy what you can get if you put your lumber out there in just the right venue. The sawdust and the mulch, or sawdust that we generate from cutting and from planing, it goes into a bin, and we've got people that are horse people around here. They come and they scoop it up and they haul it away, so we never have to touch that.
Some sawmill operators will sell their sawdust or mulch, and we are content with our good neighbor policy. We have horse people locally, and if we're making noise or making a lot of dust, free sawdust is a good thing. As far as what sells,
we sell everything from boards to turning blocks to 1 inch by 1 inch by 6 inch pieces for pin blanks.
Ink pen blanks.
So hardly anything goes to waste whenever we're cutting. And here again, the marketing, like I discussed already, the eBay. We tried Etsy. It was mixed results there. But you can use your local newspaper and magazines and stuff. If you contact them, they're just dying to find these nice
they're human interest
stories. We've used our newspaper and some other magazines. Contact them. They've come out and they've done little nice human interest stories, and it's a great way to use those kind of things for free advertising. Lawn and garden shows. We've done some lawn and garden shows in the past, and we've been able to get our name out there. Word of mouth is the best. We do absolutely zero advertising, and we have more business than we know what to do with just from these things, and of people saying, "Oh, I'm looking for somebody with a sawmill. Do you know anybody?" Of course. Well, they'll call you. Department of Natural Resources websites, they have a thing just for sawmills, and so you can get on that website and put your information in there, and then when people go do a search, you'll come up. You can make your own website. We never have done our own website, simply for the fact that we got so much business now, we don't know what to do with it. And then your time management. If the blade's not in the wood, you're not making any money.
That was something that my mentor told me. Another thing that is helpful is to only plan half of your time, because if you give a customer a deadline, it's a good thing to meet the deadline, and if you come in earlier, that's fine. But it seems to always take longer than what you think. Here's a fun bunch of tips and tricks. Like Mark said earlier, only cherry, walnut, oak, and maple matter. Well, that is absolutely not true. We have sold every type of lumber that grows in our county. All the way down from ginkgo and cottonwood, the honey locust, black locust, catalpa, hackberry, elm, sycamore, tulip poplar, ash.
Yeah, and just as an example, there's a picture of one of our eBay auctions over on the side where we figured, and it sold for $31 a board foot, and that was some sycamore. And that's very typical of sycamore and silver maple and that kind of stuff. The picture at the bottom left-hand side is a picture of
a
book-matched silver maple, which is soft maple, and people don't believe.
Nobody believes that silver maple has any value because it's a silver maple or considered a trash tree, and that's what this page is kind of about. all of this is trash. Up there in the right-hand corner, that's a picture of my staircase in my home, which is made from honey locust, which there's not too many people who like honey locust because of the thorns that destroy their tractor tires, and I understand. But if you can get through the thorns, the wood is absolutely beautiful and hard as bricks. You cannot dent that stuff, and the finish is amazing on those. On the, where you see the piece of notebook paper, there, that is a black locust that I planted in 2014. Now, the interesting thing about black locust is it is also considered a trash tree, but that tree is almost 6 inches across in 4 years, and black locust is used for shipbuilding and ground contact applications. Black locust is supposed to last 75 years in ground contact, and they grow very fast. So if you have black locust, actually count your blessings, and honey locust too. On blade and band selection, it depends on what you're cutting, and I only cut trashy hardwoods, and so what I run on my band mill is a 3/4 inch tooth spacing. With Mark's mill, he has a carbide blade on carbide tipped blade. So there are going to be different things that you'll need to consider when you are selecting blades and bands.
Yeah, and then some of the other tricks is when you're cutting, you always want to try to, if you've got some really good color in a log, you want to try to book match it, which is whenever you open up, take boards off of a log and you put them side by side, they're mirror images of each other. And so you always are trying to do that and try to cut for figure. So you might take a little bit longer time cutting a log by turning it and looking at it and doing all this stuff, but that little bit of extra time might make you 10 times the money on that same log.
And there's one myth that we hear time and time again is about curing a log. We'll have a customer come and say, well, my log is ready. It's been laying out in the pasture for 2 years. You can help your customers by telling them not to do that. They don't need to spend that time, because on band mills and circle blade mills, the modern circle blade mills, you want to get those logs to your sawmill operator as fast as you can, because it's critical for keeping your blade tool to have as much moisture in the wood as possible. Dirty logs, that's one of my favorites, because ash, I think everybody who brings an ash to me has drug it through a gravel driveway, and that's what's on my loader right here. It would be convenient if you could ask your customers to please pressure wash their logs before they bring them, but on your own logs, it's nice to have a pressure washer to get the dirt and the grit out, because that is one of the fastest ways is to dull down your blade.
Then you're always going to have equipment breakdowns. You always are going to have to keep your equipment maintained, the oil changes and bearings greased and everything like that. And then you're going to run into problem customers, the ones that want the log cut and the wood back to them today, or the ones that think you're stealing their lumber. Most of the people that are you deal with in the lumber business are nice people, but every now and then you'll get one of them crazies. And then the weather, we're out there cutting all the time, whether it's 95 degrees or 5 degrees. So it's just something you have to deal with.
I personally am not too fond of the 5 degrees, because cutting frozen logs is miserable. It's like trying to cut frozen hamburger. The cuts are not as good as when your logs are warm, 32 degrees or above. And Mark and I have made a pact that we're running heavy equipment. We aren't working alone anymore. Now, it didn't used to bother us that much, but since we live out further from emergency services, we don't work by ourselves. And on the zoning and the neighbors, We are zoned agricultural, and our neighbors are good with what we're doing here. They always get a great deal on the firewood.
Oh, and then there again, we're going back to the dirty logs. Not only do they have gravel and dirt in them, but they will have metal, they'll have concrete, they'll have porcelain, and they'll have our favorite, which are hitchhikers, which are mice, squirrels, snakes,
Bats.
All those good things.
The picture there to the right is where I've circled the 2 nails that I hit in that particular piece of lumber. On accounting and taxes, one thing that you will want to look into is that when you buy a sawmill, it is considered farm equipment. And as long as you have a farm number, you should not have to pay any sales tax on those items. Mark and I keep a separate account. We don't mix in our sawmill income with our household account. And we do keep a special file where we keep all the manuals, parts lists, everything for all of the equipment that we've purchased to run our business, run our sawmill. All right, the pleasures. We don't ever recommend anybody try to run a sawmill as a full-time income. We need health insurance, and I hate to depend on anything so fickle for that. Most of your lumber customers are really great people. In the 20 years that we've been in business, we've only had 1 check returned, which I think that's pretty good. And beautiful product. Now here on this page, this is a pair of shoes that I have made out of sycamore. I am not a woodworker, but you can make some really beautiful things, and this is from material that otherwise would have wound up in the landfill.
And now, the reason that we're getting out of the sawmill business is not only we're getting to the age where it's a lot. The hard work is getting to us, but we've got grandkids, and it's time now to start spending a little bit more time with the grandkids, and they need to learn other things like fishing and hunting and mushroom hunting and picking up shed antlers in the woods and that kind of stuff.
Growing tomatoes.
Growing tomatoes, and we're also starting our an orchard with chestnuts and hazelnuts and pawpaws and apples and things like that. So instead of cutting trees, we're starting to grow trees, and I think it's time to move on to the next business, and that's why we're getting out of the business. But we've got all this information locked in our heads that we need to get out and give it to somebody else. So just like the guy that trained Tammy on cutting, he was exiting the business and was able to pass along all of his information. So hopefully we've been able to do that.
All right, Kelly.
Okay,
so
wonderful.
Anybody that has any questions?
Yeah, awesome. Thank you for all that information. Passing it on to the next generation, I suppose, as you said. So everyone that's on the call, I'm going to activate the Q&A session now. You mentioned that sometimes there are logs that you can't use. I'm wondering if you could get specific about why some of those logs aren't usable, and then what you do with them instead. Okay.
Well, some of them are just too small. So those are the ones we usually cut up in the firewood. Others are they're just rotted. Because since we're dealing with tree service stuff, usually whenever they're taking down a tree, it's because there's something wrong with it.
Yeah.
And so if it's all dead and rotted and we can't do anything with it, we still take it and we'll set it off to the side, and we'll cut it up into firewood or just put it in a compost pile and let it rot.
Also, if we see more than just a few nails sticking out of it, or if it lights up the metal detector, it is not worth cutting. Once there are several species of wood that once there's metal in those logs, the logs become very stained. It's called blue stain, and there is no recovering that. The only thing that we can do is hopefully cut it up without trashing a chain, and then either composting it or throwing it into the firewood pile.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so we've got a question here from Kevin. Kevin, your mic should be live.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Well, sorry for the trouble at the beginning. We're not real good at this stuff, but
no worries. Can you elaborate a little bit on your kiln?
We have a Nile dehumidification kiln. We set that kiln up to handle the type of material that we would be getting. So we set ours up in order to dry 12 foot long. Now you can configure your kiln however you want it. If you're going to be cutting 16 foot, 8 foot, 12 foot, quite honestly, I don't want to cut anything more than 12 foot long, because by the time they're that big, they get darn heavy and hard to move. So the stack inside of the kiln is roughly 7 foot wide by 12 foot long, and stacked about 5 to 6 feet. 5 to 6 feet high. I like the dehumidification kiln. Since all we do is hardwoods, it's a low temperature. It runs us about between, on a load, which our loads are maximum of about 2,500 board feet. It runs in electricity about $50 a load. Is there anything else that I can tell you about? We run our material down to 6%, and it takes us roughly 30 days to do that. It depends on how long all of that material has been air drying. Sometimes they'll go a little faster, and sometimes it will go a little slower, and it also depends on what time of the year it is. There's lots of variables. Yeah,
and it's all electric. And one of the reasons why it's all electric is we have a wind turbine and solar panels. So we produce enough electricity through this wind generator and the solar panel to pretty much run our entire sawmill business and most of our house. So we don't use so the kiln we have is not wood fired or gas fired. It's all electric.
Very cool. Is that a 220 unit?
Yes.
Yeah, it runs essentially on a Nile dehumidification kiln. It's like having a giant dehumidifier, the type that you would use in your basement. The power, you need the power to run a giant dehumidifier or a giant air conditioner and two fans for what I would say a modest size kiln operation. The size that we set up, we felt like it was correctly sized for us and the volume of material that we could produce. Again, our point wasn't to cut volumes of material and sell it wholesale. Our objective was to cut quality material, less of it, at a higher board price.
Right. That's a contained, enclosed unit?
Yes, sir.
Yes, it's basically a big box with 6-inch thick walls, and the doors have got rubber seals so that whenever everything's closed up, it's pretty much airtight, and then you have two vents on either side that you can control opening and then closing those vents.
To help control the temperature.
Because your temperature, you want to keep it between 110 and 115 degrees. So you don't want it to get any warmer than that. So if it gets a little warmer, you have to open up your vents. But other than that, it's pretty much a contained room.
It should not run over 120 degrees. freeze, because after that point you're going to have issues with case hardening, and that's
Right.
a terrible thing to happen to hardwood.
Yeah. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, thanks, Kevin. Any other questions from our audience here? Remember, you can press the button there to enter the queue, or *6 on your phone. I'm wondering if you two can elaborate on some of the techniques to actually, when the log's actually in the saw, the process of like making these book match products or cutting for figure, you said. Are there, like, how long did it take you to even learn some of these nuanced techniques?
Several years, actually, because every log you get is completely different. And so when we first started cutting, we were terrible. We made all kinds of mistakes. Some of the boards that we cut were just plain Jane, nothing fancy, nothing real cool. And so just by continuously cutting stuff and playing with the logs, and you start looking at how the tree grew, and if there's any crotches on it or knots or anything like that, to turn it and get it. And once you start practicing, and you start seeing that when you make a certain cut, you're going to get a certain. It's like with white oak. If you just cut it straight on through, and you've got this flat sawn looking boards with no figure, you're going to get about $3 a board foot. But if you take and what they call quarter saw that exact log and get the tiger pattern that they call for quarter sawn pattern, you'll go from $3 a board foot to about $8 to $9 a board foot, with the exact same amount of effort that you have put into cutting. So that's one way that, how you set that log up and where you start cutting that can make a big difference on the profitability from that same log.
It takes a little practice and time, and actually it's nearly an art form in learning how to set a log on the mill and make that first cut to square, because once you make that first cut, you've locked in the other three sides, and then that first cut will determine whether the value of your log.
Interesting. Great. Okay, we've got another call here in the queue. Okay, I don't have your name, but person on the phone, you're live.
This is Brian. Yeah. I was wondering, you made a point of saying to not rely on it as a primary source of income. If you could speak generally about what your expenses are, and besides fuel and electricity, perhaps what ongoing expenses are relative to revenue, and perhaps even speak generally about how much of a full-time salary equivalent have you been able to replace on average from year to year with a business like this?
Well, it goes back to how many hours do you want to spend out there, and how good you get at cutting the high dollar stuff. I can tell you that with Tammy, she took the income from her mill, and she paid off our 30-year loan on this 10 acres and the house we built and all of the outbuildings we have. We got a 30-year loan to do all that, and she paid it off in 11 years with nothing but just the sawmill income. Now, she was working real hard. It's pretty much her full-time business. So the only real expenses, like you said, electricity, your fuel, but then it's how much money you put out for your mill, because you have to figure that into the equation. If you buy any of your equipment, all the money that you spend on all of your equipment, you will have to recoup somewhere down the road. Then, other than that,
a very simple way to do it. If I were starting over again, is to get a modest mill and do custom cutting. For the first year or two, depending on how much time you're investing in it, is to cut your own material and make all the mistakes on stuff that you can easily turn into firewood. After that, if you want to do custom cutting only, that leaves you with the expense of a sawmill, a loader, and chainsaw. Then what we charge per hour for custom cutting, and you're hustling, is $50 an hour. So to me, that would be the best way to start, and then that keeps your overhead down, your expenses down. Your main expenses are going to be with bands, or depending on the type of mill that you have it for your blades. So have I helped you any with that?
Yeah, very, very good. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, thanks, Brian, for that question. Let's see, so last call for any questions from the audience here. Or any final thoughts or words from Tammy and Mark?
Well, thank you, Kelly.
Thank you for having us on here. And if there's anybody there that would like to even contact us later on and come by and see what we're doing and get an actual visual and a hands-on of what it takes, we're more than happy to give everybody as much information as we have in our brain and pass it on to somebody else. So there's no problem with that.
Yeah, you both talked about the importance of finding a mentor, someone to learn the practice from.
Yes.
So, are you willing to be
Yeah, I would not be where I am if I did not have, if I did not rely on the experience of somebody else.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, yeah. So for all the attendees, I'll include your email, I suppose, in a follow-up email within the next week with this recording and the slides, and folks can contact you from there.
All right. Sounds great.
Okay. Well, any last thoughts before we wrap up here?
I think we're good.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Tammy and Mark, so much for all that wealth of information. Let's see. I don't know. Kevin has one final thought here.
Okay.
Kevin, do you have some final thought here? Or was that a mistake? Maybe Kevin accidentally hit the... Okay, I don't know.
Hi, this is Kevin. Can you hear me?
Sure. Yeah,
Kevin.
Go ahead.
Sorry for the last alibi here. Have y'all cut any Osage orange?
Yes, we have.
Because I've heard folks a little reluctant to do that. It's very hard.
It is hard, but if you have a good sharp blade,
and if you get it fresh, quite honestly, I don't find cutting hedge any worse than cutting a lot of material as long as it is fresh cut. If it is dry, then no thank you.
Yeah.
But you need that moisture in that log for your blade, and it cuts as well as anything else.
Yeah, and it's actually one of our better sellers. If you have good quality hedge,
which is rare.
It's like gold.
Beautiful wood, and I've seen it in cabinets and flooring. It's amazing.
Yes,
the color and
we
grain.
sell a lot of it for people who make bow staves,
turkey calls,
duck calls. So you can sell it all the way down to, like I said, pen blank size. And so if we get a good Osage log in, we're real happy.
Yeah. Well, wonderful information. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Kevin. Well, okay, on that note, thanks everyone for joining in, and again to Tammy and Mark. We've got a whole slate of fall nutshells left to go through December, so check those out and join us for as many as you can. Have a good night, everyone, and thanks again.
All right, good night.
Good night.